Hi guys, it's Miss King. Just trying something new, which I plan on using from now on. I know Edpuzzle was a little confusing for some people, but today and tomorrow we're reviewing for our unit test. Our unit test on Friday goes over all the things that we've talked about in this huge unit called Renaissance, Reformation, Scientific Revolution, and Enlightenment, or I usually refer to it on your homework as RRSSRE. And today's our first review. The homework will be on Edulastic like normal, but obviously this is a great resource to study. It's also a great resource to, if you have a printer, you can print it out and use these as flashcards as well, or just run through the PowerPoint and see what you got. All right, the first question is going to be what caused the Renaissance. Now these are all going to be multiple choice. So I'm just kind of going through this. So what caused the Renaissance? Well, the Renaissance was caused when traders brought classical ideas to Europe. Remember, we had the Silk Road that brought a lot of trade to Rome and to Florence in particular, and those ideas spread. What type of economy developed during the Renaissance? So we're going to see a shift from kind of bartering things, and what we're going to see is a money-based economy come out of that. So we're actually exchanging money for money, not things for things, or actually money for things versus things for things. Why was Florence called the cradle of the Renaissance? So usually this question, kind of think about what is usually in a cradle. And so it's basically, Florence is called the cradle of the Renaissance because that's where it was born. What important changes made literature more popular during the Renaissance? Well, what we start to see is before the Renaissance, everything was written in Latin. So if you couldn't read or speak Latin, or really read it, you couldn't read. So you have a lot of people that are considered or are illiterate, can't read or write because they're not clergy members, so they're not in the church, they're not reading the church documents that are written in Latin to gain that literacy. So what ends up happening is we have this invention of the printing press. And what the printing press does is allows copies of text to be made. It's almost kind of the original copy machine, except you put the paper down, you put the stamps on it, you went like that, you went over, and you basically were able to print a full page of text. With that, instead of having to handwrite everything, you could now make multiple copies. And when you get those multiple copies and they're exposed to more people have that opportunity instead of just in church. What powerful family controlled Florence for 300 years? They also put themselves in their own kind of painting of the three kings with Jesus. That would be the Medici. Three characteristics of Renaissance painting. So this on your test is going to be one of those not questions. So which of the following are not a characteristic of Renaissance painting? But characteristics of Renaissance painting is you're going to see realistic things. The paintings are going to look realistic. You're going to have settings that reflect the world of the artist. So typically in the Middle Ages, the context of art was only religion. Now we're going to see there's still a lot of religious art. That doesn't like go away. But there's other contexts or subjects of what art is. And it really shows, rather than everything being in a church, it reflects the world of the artist. So you may have a painting of Mary or the Madonna, and instead of being in a church setting, she may be out, like outside somewhere. And those paintings also show a depth and perspective. So rather than having everything 2D, you can now look at a painting and see, okay, this tree is much farther away than this person is to me. Because before that, everything was 2D. So you would have a tree literally next to a person. They were in the same plane. They were in the same space. What we now see is we can see some distance in the artwork, which is really great. Excuse me. That idea of creating a 3D perspective on a 2D surface. Characteristics of Da Vinci. We know he was an artist, architect, mathematician. We know that he studied human anatomy. We know that he painted the Last Supper, which is the meal of Jesus with his 12 disciples. And then we also he also painted the portrait that we most popularly know, and that's the Mona Lisa. What geographic factor contributed to Italy becoming so wealthy? If you really look at this map, it's really showing you, and actually kind of tells you the answer of why Italy became so wealthy, and that's really because of its location. Italy is right here, and then you can see the trade that just spurs off of every angle and hits so many different locations. What political unit contributed most to the development of the Renaissance? You can see they're split up, lots and lots of them. That is going to be the city-state. All these different city-states are going to contribute to that wealth because they're going to trade with each other. Excuse me. So again, what art method added that distance and depth, which I was just talking about? You can kind of see, okay, these hills or these mountains are clearly far away from this part of the railroad tracks, and you can see that as it goes back, it's getting smaller to this vanishing point where that is the horizon, and you can't see it anymore, but it gives you the perspective that it's continuing to move. That's going to be called linear perspective. If we were in school, we'd actually do it, so I kind of feel bad, but it is a great project to do, that you can kind of look and see, okay, this is going farther away. Excuse me. What is humanism? Humanism is that cultural movement that's based on the classical works, so Rome and Greece and all those things that people in the Middle Ages kind of got away from because they were worried about survival with the plague and all of those things, and they were working on the manner, so they weren't worried about what Protagoras said or Aristotle. They weren't worried about that. Define individualism. Now, this one on the quiz, some people missed, but it's kind of odd to me that people missed it because the word individual is in individualism. And an individual is just this idea of the moral worth of a person rather than a group. And so this obviously is the opposite of the manor, where the manor was its own self-functioning world, and they didn't know of anything really outside of it. They provided what they needed for each other, and then that really wasn't about you. It was about the manor and everything. And so individualism is this concept that comes about during the Renaissance that is like, I'm just going to worry about me. I'm going to emphasize what I think. I'm going to show how I'm valuable and how I can contribute rather than the collective whole. Secularism. So obviously this is anything that kind of separates government and religion. Secularism we talked about with music and art, how these sometimes the content or the context of the art and the music wasn't necessarily about religion. In the Middle Ages, art and music was primarily, well, not primarily, it was religious. Music was not for entertainment, it was in church, and it was to pray. And now we see this secular side come out where we have people creating music for entertainment and dancing, and it's not all, art to show off beauty rather than, and I mean, the religious stuff was beautiful too and is, but just concentrating on different things rather than just religion. Giovanni Boccaccio brought about writing in the vernacular, and the vernacular is just how we speak. Um, you might pick up a book, if you pick up a book such as like War and Peace or Shogun, or even some of the stuff that you've read in reading class, it's not necessarily the vernacular. So for example, in Warriors Don't Cry, there is the text, which is what the author has written, but then you can tell that when the main character is speaking, she uses the vernacular. So it's about how something sounds, not necessarily being grammatically correct. Um, Julius Caesar, for some of you, is going to be very, very difficult to understand because that's not how we speak anymore, but it's how they spoke in the past. But Miss Guthrie is going to give you kind of the classical original text and then is going to give you a vernacular version, basically retelling the story in how we speak to each other. How, even us, even we don't have necessarily in our conversations every day speak proper grammar. I mean, we don't. Well, some people do, and I commend them for that, but I certainly don't. And so I speak in a vernacular or just how I speak every day, not necessarily proper. The main idea of Machiavelli's The Prince was basically just to how to get and keep political power. One, how to get it. Two, how to keep it. I'm sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. So basically just how to get the people on your side. And basically that's the whole thing, is if the people don't believe in you, people don't trust you, you're not going to keep political power. This is pretty simple. What documented Martin Luther hammer to the church or castle church door in Wittenberg. If you watched the video and did the homework, you know that this is the 95 Theses, a list of 95 things that was corrupt or wrong with the Catholic Church at the time. Why did England become a Protestant country? Basically, it's because Henry VIII, who was controversial in history by himself, it's his own story, declared himself head of the Church of England. And he didn't want to share power with the Pope. And so he just said, fine, we're not going to be a part of the Catholic Church anymore. We're going to be, it's called Anglican, which you did read, and if you did the work. And he did this for a couple of reasons. He didn't want to share power. He also wanted to get divorced. And in the Catholic religion, divorce doesn't exist. So he kind of created his own church so that he could divorce his wife. The original goal of the Reformation obviously was to correct corruption in the Catholic Church. I don't think they ever meant to create all these new religions out of it. I don't think they necessarily planned on like Baptist and Anglican and Episcopalian and all these different religions to come out of it, because their original purpose was like, let's just fix it. Sorry, the highway's right there. Let's just fix what's wrong with it. Sorry, just had to get some water. So this idea of predestination, that's a picture of John Calvin. I really wish we were in school because this stuff is really great to discuss. So predestination is basically this idea from John Calvin that before you were even born, God decided whether you were going to be saved or not. And this is kind of an abstract, and this is why I wish we were in class, this kind of abstract idea of you did not gain salvation through living your life. You were already saved or you were not. And so your day-to-day actions would tell you if you were saved or not. And John Calvin had a lot of strict rules in his church. There was no dancing, there was no playing cards, there were curfews. A Calvinist priest could come into your house anytime and make sure that you weren't doing anything or had anything that you weren't supposed to do or have. Just really strict protocols. But his point was that if you are living a pure life, it's because you are already saved, and you don't need to try and live that purified life. It just comes natural to you. And then in Lutheranism and Calvinism, what was the supreme authority of their? Okay, so that's all I have. And then just wanted to mention, please go on to Edulastic. That is your review homework. It should have all of these questions on there for you, or some of them. Again, this is a really good resource to help you study. These ones that we went over today are all going to be multiple choice. Tomorrow we will focus on the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. Really a lot on the Enlightenment because I didn't get to explain a lot. of the Enlightenment to you, because you primarily had those Ed Puzzle videos. If you did not complete the Ed Puzzle assignments, please go back onto Google Classroom and complete those. Those are videos with questions embedded within the lesson, within the video. So the video will go and then it'll stop and ask you a question. You need to answer it, and then you continue the video, and it grades it for you. So you'll get immediate feedback from that, so you know exactly what you got right and what you got wrong. And then we will, hopefully, I'm trying to figure out a way to get Angels and Demons on here for you, because even though it is remote learning, it's a really great movie that can really give you some deep thinking into these four movements that were happening at the same time. And it's just it's a good film. It's good. So I'm trying to figure out how to get that to you for next week. But if we do not, we will be moving on to the Mesoamerica. So we'll be talking about Mexico, Central America, part of South America, primarily the Inca, Maya, and Aztec empires, and how they gained gained power and were so innovative, and then how they were ultimately conquered and destroyed by Europeans. Um, but we will talk about that. Please, please, please do your homework. And I will see you tomorrow.